Well, hello and welcome to another in the series of Cafe Insights. I'm Andrew Vine, CEO of the Insight Bureau, and today I'm in conversation with Daniel Franklin,
hello,
of The Economist. So Daniel, it's great to see you again. I think it was a year ago that I was here. So just give me an update. What keeps you busy these days?
Well, a lot's happened in a year. It's been a busy year.
Of course.
For myself, I edited a book called Megatech Technology in 2050, so that's kept me quite busy. Been quite a few trips talking about the book in America and in Asia, in Japan, Korea.
Yeah.
But the world is keeping us very busy at The Economist. There's so much happening to engage, try to explain to our readers. Obviously, Donald Trump in America, Brexit here. Funnily enough, I think if I were to do a hierarchy of the big political surprises as viewed from a year ago, I think actually the biggest shock is not so much Trump or Brexit, actually Emmanuel Macron in France. Although we'd spotted him a long time ago as someone to keep an eye out for, I think the fact that he could actually come through and win the presidency and then win a majority in the National Assembly when previously he didn't have even a party behind him, that's an extraordinary thing.
Yeah, so I mean, when you think back, I mean, this is the amazing thing, when we were sitting together a year ago, there was a percentage chance that some of these things could unfold. There's a lot of unexpected results have happened in the last year, and so we seem to live in a year of turbulence, but also a year of the unexpected.
Yes, well, I think Brexit actually was always going to be close, so that was one where the opinion polls were showing this was close run referendum. The Britons have always been rather sceptical about Europe, so although I think the conventional wisdom was that in the end the country would opt for the safer of the option, the status quo. That's what tends to happen in referendums, and that's more or less I think what I thought would probably happen, but I always thought there was a fairly significant chance that it would go the other way. Trump was a bigger shock. I think even actually a few weeks out from the election it looked as if Hillary was going to win. But in America it's a two-party system. The big thing for him was capturing the Republican nomination. Once you've done that out of a very crowded field where all of the other candidates were disappointing and where he put them down very effectively, it has to be said. Once you've got that Republican-Democrat contest in what is essentially a 50-50 nation, there's always a fair chance that you're going to end up as president, and of course it's been quite a show ever since.
Yeah. Of course, a lot of what's happening with Donald Trump at the moment is having ramifications all around the world.
Yes, I think people are having to get used to the idea that it's a very different America, and that's going to be the case for some time. Not necessarily only 3.5 more years of a Trump presidency. You could have 7.5 more years of a Trump presidency. So I think there's serious thinking going on about how you adjust to this, and but there are countervailing forces. I mean, I mentioned Macron in France, and that's very much an internationalist view, more of an open world view. And I think there is a real argument going on between the forces of an open world and the forces of a more national-minded world, which is going to be playing out over the next year or so. And you have some unlikely champions on each side. I mean, Xi Jinping presenting himself as the champion of globalization and environmentalism, when in many ways, of course, China is much more complicated than that in reality.
So, a lot of people are interpreting this as perhaps the beginning of the end of globalization.
Well, I think it's certainly stalled. I think that much you can say, that there's a questioning of who wins and who loses, that it's not all hunky-dory in the world of globalization. But on the other hand, I think there are strong forces pushing still for globalization. There's a lot further that globalization could go. And technology is one of those forces. Technology is pushing very hard to stop ideas spreading and technology moving, and maybe there will be some shortening of supply chains, but in the ideas economy, they're going to buzz around the world very, very fast. Even with Brexit, leaving the EU, there's a lot of people who still want to have a very open Britain and to use the phrase of the Brexiteers, a global Britain. So it's not quite as simple as globalization or not. It's sometimes what type of globalization you have.
Yeah, and the flavour of it could be seeing a shift towards the east, and we've seen this perhaps presenting a pristine opportunity for China to flex its muscles and assert itself even more in the world. And,
Well, I think
and given more space to do that, it will certainly try.
That's certainly the case, and China is moving in wherever you see America seeming to retreat, whether it be, the Xi Jinping speech at Davos, presenting himself as the champion of globalization, or in the sort of argument over who has greater influence in various parts of Asia, and a lot of Asian countries. I mean, you live in Singapore, I think you feel this very keenly there, pulled between America as a strategic ally and long-term friend of the system that Singapore has thrived on, and China as a huge trade partner, increasingly exerting its influence, and country after country in Southeast Asia and other parts of Asia are sort of feeling that pull, and China is making the most of it right now.
When we're working together in conferences or client events, and it's really tried to join the dots in terms of what this kind of means. It must be a very unsettling time for many organisations running global operations, because the forces all seem to be changing.
Yes, but I think it's also a time when there's great interest and curiosity in trying to puzzle it out, and that trying to see the big picture, trying to see put a set of probabilities on what the likely scenarios are, is particularly helpful, because people need to plan, and you can't just say, well, bury your head in the sand and wait till it all goes away. It's not going away. And how do you assess the way that it's all likely to pan out, and what sort of contingency plans do you put in place? These are big questions for organisations around the world.
Of course, one major publication that you're heavily involved in every year is The World In, and so that comes out in November, in the middle of November or so, the early November. And so that process has already started, I hear, too.
Yes, well, it all begins actually in the spring. We have an initial editorial brainstorming and start to draw up a plan for it, and then the team assembles in September to put it together. That's when the really intensive work starts. But yes, for a while I'm totally focused not on the here and now, but on what's going to be happening over the course of the coming year, and that's a fascinating project to work on.
And then a year later we can have a good chuckle about what
then I
happened.
look back on what I got right and what I got wrong. So,
but it's not just you. I mean, I think the wonderful thing about that is he's pulling together, the best minds from the economists, but also invited guests from captains of business and politicians, really pulling together a view at least.
And I think the view it reflects the fact that no single view is going to be something that you should depend on. It's good to draw different ways of thinking, and perhaps no time more so than now, when there's a lot of challenges to what used to be conventional wisdom. It's incumbent upon us to try and understand where all sorts of people are coming from with the way they want the world to move.
And then you mentioned Megatech, which followed on from the very successful Mega Change, and a lot of people scratch their heads thinking, how on earth can you predict out as far as 2050? I mean, this is insane, But
well, in Mega Change, first of all, I mean, there are certain things which you can not know for certain, but you can see the big tectonic shifts in demography, for example, or you mentioned the shift from economic power and political geostrategic power towards Asia. Those are things that you can start to get your mind around, and I think that's helpful. For technology, of course, here you are with your iPhone, it's only 10 years old, so 30 years ago you couldn't have envisaged that you'd have had this extraordinary computing power and carried around you pretty much at all times. So I hope that what Megatech does is something slightly more intelligent and intriguing, which is to say, how do you begin to peer into the tech future? What's the toolkit you need? And then it looks at what does the current state of physics tell you about what will become possible in technologically in the next 30 years, or same for biology, which is at a fascinating stage of development. So where's the money going? Follow the money is always a good question. So Silicon Valley venture capitalist says, well, here's the money, you'll see it all surfacing in 10 years' time in the shape of companies that have come through this wave of technology and are emerging as very big players. So it's a sort of a look, the beginning of it anyway, is a look at the real fundamental drivers of technology before you get on to saying, well, 2050, where are we? And 2050 is a sort of metaphor anyway. It encourages you to look over the horizon, not at the immediate short term, but to look at the deeper trends that are going to be changing the way we all live and work.
And when you do look at all these various trends and indicators, does it make you optimistic about the future?
I think if you read Megatech, for example, it's not a depressing read, although a lot of the people who think of the tech future take a kind of dystopian view about it. I think the focus is probably rather more on the enormous potential that technology has, but at the same time without ignoring the very real issues that it throws up. I mean, the concluding chapter is all about the unintended consequences.
It's great that someone's out there helping us to kind of peer over the horizon, as it were. Daniel, great pleasure to see you again. Nice to catch up.
Catch up again in a year's time.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.